Pleased to say that Sir Vince Cable joins me now in the studio. Welcome to the show, Sir Vince.
Thank you for inviting me on.
It's very good to have you on. So tell us about your thesis that China and India are going to become the most powerful countries in the world.
Well, the argument is that, while we have a lot of noise, and, Trump particularly being a dominant figure on the world stage, wars and issues of that kind, there is something quietly happening under the surface. Since in the last 30 years, the share of the Western world in the world economy, the Western world being Europe, North America, Japan, essentially, has shrunk from 60% to 40%. And the big emerging markets have gone the other direction, 40 to 60%. They now have the majority of the world economy, and this was led by China. China's now got some problems, but India is now the most rapidly growing major economy in the world by a long way. And you've got Vietnam, other countries in that region, even some of the more dynamic places in Africa beginning to motor. So the center of the world economy has moved. And, when the economy moves, a lot of things that you can deal with economies, like spending more on defense or prestige issues of various kind.
And of course, this leads to a whole host of questions that we can explore here. The first, I guess, is it a case, is it a case of either or can one argue, as the pie gets bigger, the world economy grows, everybody gets wealthier. China becoming richer does not necessarily mean the West must become poorer.
No, I think that's a very powerful and important point. And we are interdependent, and we should try to keep that. There are so many pressures at the moment to cut your links with one country or the other. Particularly the Trump view of the world, it's zero sum. If we gain, somebody else loses, vice versa.
You were the business secretary. In fact, I was one of your junior ministers, and you're an old China hand as well. You've spent time working in China. Is there, within your analysis, a call for Britain to recalibrate and to understand perhaps that we should have good relations with China? They're going to be a significant trading partner.
Yeah, we should. We shouldn't be naive about it. There are a lot of bad things happening in China, and we're not dealing with Mother Teresa here. Very hard-headed and ruthless, and there are issues in which I'm sure they want to do us down. But you have to deal with them, and there are potentially mutual interests. We shouldn't be naive in dealing with China, but paranoia is the other extreme, and I think we've lurched a bit in that direction, partly under pressure from the US.
And what does the rise of India and China mean in terms of geopolitics? Because although we regard China with suspicion, it's not necessarily a country that's a sort of interventionist country. It has its issue with Taiwan, but India as well, outside of its own near region, does not seem a country that's going to get overly involved in international foreign affairs, or have I got that wrong?
You're quite right. They're not active outside the Indian subcontinent, and they're not yet, a great power. Arguably, on some measures, probably the third biggest economy in the world. But from India's point of view, their main preoccupation is holding the country together, lifting many, many more people out of poverty. There's still vast poverty in India, despite some very dynamic areas. And that's their preoccupation, and rightly so. The Chinese, there's a lot of people accuse the Chinese of trying to take over the world. I don't buy that for 1 minute. At the moment, they're just sitting back watching the Western world destroy itself, actually, with this, unnecessary war. Trump's tearing up alliances, the Europeans paralysed by, inability to work together. So there's not a great deal of active Chinese activity outside of business, but they're doing good business, and their exports are growing rapidly, and they have a near monopoly of some key technologies now, particularly in the green technologies. But they're roughly a little bit behind the US in artificial intelligence and advanced chips, things like quantum physics. They're probably now on a par, and the Chinese are just quietly building up their technological strength in the belief that in the long run this is what will take them to be number one.